What did you guys discuss? You didn't discuss at all?
Yeah. We did. We had a long discussion.
A structured discussion. So what was the summary of your discussion?
Eventually we said we can't separate the two. Whether it's a technology push or socially driven, eventually they intertwine. Because...
entangled.
Okay?
What is technology push?
So if you are trying to evolve technology for the sake of driving the boundaries or driving beyond the boundaries, that has no social need when you're starting out. However, you can now branch out into finding social needs that can link to that technology. Positively or negatively, that's relevant.
So could technology push in a way be developing technology for technology's sake without potentially thinking of its consequences?
Yeah.
What did you guys think of Popular Mechanics as a magazine, as a regime, as a way of thinking?
I think you just summed it up. It's a little bit like, well, what you just said.
Okay.
That was a question.
This is where all of this
That was a question. What did I say?
It must have been really profound.
It's a Saturday.
Yeah, I think this Popular Mechanics, I love it, by the way. So I'm not saying I'm not guilty of it, but not the AK-47. But it's a technotopia. It's a utopia of technology. How did we get there? How did we get into this world of like, technology is going to save the planet? It's all about technology. What's the next big thing? Nikhil has an answer.
We were thinking of it from a different perspective. Why technology has come in is actually society has become separated from ecology. And technology, in a way, is actually bridging that gap. It's mimicking the ecological world that humans have got separated from.
In terms of like connection and what we need for fulfillment, for understanding of ourselves and our purpose on Earth, and I think machines in a way is filling that void.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of consequences that are. There's actually, you should all check out a book called Nature Deficiency Disorder, addressing, anyway, pretty much children are screwed because...
Nature Deficiency Disorder.
Yeah, and it's a real thing.
What does it mean?
Yeah, well, because kids are, and the issue is that they're also finding issues around creativity and whatnot with kids in terms of street smarts and solving complex problems, which in the world the issues that we need to face today require complex.
You've seen Wall-E?
Yeah.
Isn't that great? Then like all the human beings become like these blobs floating around on little hovercrafts, and they can't walk because they're like technologically retarded.
It'll be very interesting to see in terms of, there's a lot of subsystems at work which I'm sure we're not aware of. Morphic fields being one of them, and all of those kinds of things. And I'm looking very keenly at the Mars, and I'm following this thing, 100-year spaceship project as well, in terms of where the engineering a spaceship and it's got all the best guys of NASA and everything and so on. And they're discussing so many different aspects of human life and how life would be sustained there. And I'm thinking about our connectedness to this particular planet and our ecosystem. And it'll be interesting to see when that happens, what the effects are psychologically, all of those kinds of things. Because then you're removed from this ecosystem completely. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are engrossed as a human species with like progress, clearly, and invention and discovery, and technology is like one of the forms of expressing ourselves as human beings. But we've somehow become disconnected from the effects of what technology is doing to our planet, right? Oh no, is that power sharing?
Yeah. I don't think so. No, if there's load shedding at Seafront.
No, no, it's on here.
So we don't get load shedding here.
Electricity
Because going out into rest.
Technology has failed us. No, most exciting part. No, technology has not failed us. It was a human problem. Okay. Anyway, what did you guys have to say at this table?
Yeah, we got into nuclear power.
And what were the...
We did say that technology has always existed and we're completely unable to take it ourselves from it in some odd way.
Like naturally, since the beginning of recorded time, people, to advance their lives and to progress, they've needed to implement some form of technology. How you want to frame that is up to you, but you needed it like to create a fire. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to move forward. So there's been an embedded entanglement from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's difficult to even technological process of having a child to disconnect. Like if you wanted to have a child today and that child be uninvolved with any technology, it would be impossible.
It would be impossible.
And I think it's also the way we look at like our paradigm of what technology is. Like we think it's computers and phones and Wi-Fi and incubators, but it's also like fire, and it's also like
the wheel.
Trees that take in the carbon in the air and like filter it and like release oxygen. So like it's actually the way we're looking at technology.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Does anyone add? I'm a little bit still concerned about this. What's going on with this thing?
Well,
Technology. Sneaking back.
That's the other question. Like what happens when technology surpasses
Artificial intelligence. Oh my goodness, you're getting way too sci-fi now. Put away those popular mechanics.
You must, and I suggest everyone, if they haven't watched Big Hero 6, it's another animated movie, and it just shows kids like how technology is going to change their lives. It's this guy invents this guy called Baymax, and it's this guy that can do anything. Like it's supposed to be a method to solve any medical problems, but they realize that this guy that they've invented can do anything. And I even believed it after watching it. The 3D is pretty believable, and that's like the messaging that's going to kids these days. It's like technology is going to save you.
Technology is going to save us.
No, he saves the day at the end.
So how do we... So technology is obviously important. We need technology. But what's behind the drive of technology is people, right? And our thinking.
Egos.
Egos? Yeah, maybe, but how are we going to change this? Because clearly we're not going in the right direction, man.
What we discussed and what's interesting to note is how you framed the question in the first place, where it speaks to our perception about how all those things are intertwined. Where we say, what's the link between society and technology? Oh, and ecology.
Yeah.
That's how we think about things.
That is.
Which is a big problem.
So, techno-ecology, new word.
Technology.
Technology. Okay, maybe we need some more technology.
What about biotech?
Biotech, yeah. But that already exists. For what reason? This is very irritating.
What if inclusion becomes the biggest driver behind technology and not just human progression?
Can you expand on that?
Say again?
I can try my best and ask the class to help me. I said, what if inclusion becomes the biggest driver behind technology? I suppose it speaks to the mindset change and the ontological change that needs to happen. But yeah, there's probably, and I suppose that's what we're trying to do in this program, there isn't enough effort being put behind how to make businesses more inclusive and how to make systems more inclusive. And if there was more people, if we could expand what we're doing here by 100 times, then we'd be able to, a million times, we'd be able to push that agenda, that social agenda. And if we are from Salula, like he like epitomizes it really well. He's like, he doesn't want to talk to people that don't have a social agenda. Like that's his business imperative. Like people must have a social agenda.
So he's building a niche. Are you guys okay with one screen? Okay, interesting discussion, guys, and there's no real answer to this one. But the point is that we do need to start thinking about how to create alternatives, and this is where I'm going to get to now, and how on these different levels alternatives by consciously minded individuals such as yourselves and the amazing technologies that you're going to create are going to create alternatives that become living examples which compete with those unsustainable, what we call regimes or technologies. So I'm going to give you some modern day examples. I've already spoken about some of them. But climate change and the use of fossil fuels are intricately linked, as are transport, cars and roads. South African infrastructure as well. We are very much locked in South Africa in the service delivery of trying to expand existing technologies to the majority of people. So inclusion for the government is about solving service delivery problems. And how do they do that? It's about expanding existing technologies which are in actual fact unsustainable. So they don't actually realize. So the dominant paradigm in government and in our policy around energy, for example, is they don't realize the social impacts that they are creating through putting millions of rands into a Medupi or a Kusile. Because there will be social impacts along the way. And that's, once again, that techno-utopian way of thinking. But it's not just energy, it's also housing. The way in which we link housing to votes. Housing is also about technology. I'm generalizing now, right? But the way in which, the quality of homes that are being rolled out in South Africa, they're very box-like, and I'm going to show you some examples. Are they taking the ecological factors into consideration? The houses that we build for the poor. Aren't they opportunities for, change, for new ways of doing things? Do these new communities that don't have services have to actually be connected to communities that do have services in terms of infrastructure? For example, do we have to extend our electrical infrastructure in terms of the grid, or can we have off-grid for these communities? Why are we using the same kind of thinking that's putting us into the same problems? Can we not use a different kind of thinking, a different methodology to actually expand our services and solve the service industry problem in South Africa? Why are we not thinking like that? Yeah.
I don't really think we are not thinking like that. The only problem in the world today is that, being poor is actually criminal because you are made to accept everything. So you find that the poor are just put in tight spots and because they have no choice. But it's not that the leadership does not recognize the fact that actually we can do better for the poor. So again, it goes back to the first question where we say that, what is important to note is that if we all change our mindsets and also the way of thinking, the power structures, we can actually do better for the poor because we know what is right and what is wrong.
I don't agree with you. I think that the way in which government services in South Africa are being rolled out is exactly an extension of the same dominant regime that we have where there are services. For example, toilets, water, energy, waste removal, is an extension. Rather than thinking about new, innovative, creative, sustainable ways of servicing those communities, which are not an extension of the unsustainable system that we live in. You get what I'm saying? And I was trying to say, there are examples of this, because, and I'll show you, all the 2.5 million houses that have been built are an extension in terms of the paradigm of thinking of the systems, and they're actually failing in many ways.
So you want me to believe that they don't know that that is the wrong way?
Well, there's clear evidence that they've rolled out millions of houses in the wrong way, yes.
And it's not that they don't know. I wouldn't even say it's about knowing. It's like we said before, it's about market, and it's also about capacity.
Yeah, it's about capacity, but it's also about thinking in a certain way.
That's what I mean.
It's a rigid way of thinking that we're only delivering a house. It has changed. I'm not going to lie. It has changed because I've spoken to these guys as well. It's now about living. It's not about delivering a house. It's about homes.
Yeah.
Homes.
Which is a totally different way of thinking. And what does that do to the technology or the infrastructure? Yeah.
This is a nice example because it takes me back to a few weeks ago. I spent time with Architects Sans Frontier UK in Woodstock, looking at the empty land parcels and how social or affordable housing can be implemented in Woodstock and integrated into already existing and really good city functions and amenities, as opposed to building more of these like into gateway, Blickies door type housing for poor people. And the thinking around the methodology was like a response to how people shouldn't be moved away from the city and opportunities, but should be integrated. And you shouldn't just look at like the structure of like building a house, but like what parks and what like social and economic systems exist in Woodstock that poor or low income people could be able to feed into. And already, I mean, Woodstock does have that spectrum socioeconomically. And it was again so difficult to communicate our proposals to government because they do think in like structure, rigid, and let's just like build the Blickies door and then give them like water and electricity. As opposed to looking at it as a home and also looking at it as a home integrated into like a greater community network.
The livability of it.
Yeah.
It's often because engineers are tasked to do these things. And engineers think in defined ways, like in confined ways. They have to put pipes in, they have to put a house in, they have to, and that's it. The house is built.
But
the rest is going to come.
Isn't part of that also it's safe and it's known? So they know what the upside is, but they also know what the downside is. So they rather just go with that because if they innovate, there could be a whole lot of other repercussions that they don't think of before. So they go for what is safe and what is quickest, and then they kind of.
But if you know that it doesn't work,
say again?
on being safe and
doing
the project with them.
Exactly.
Anyway,
they've got numbers.
Just
what is being measured?
Guys, let's go back to transition. So that's just one example of a kind of socio-cognitive regime or way of thinking that results in technologies and its extension of technologies and systems which are unsustainable. I'm going to pick on the Americans in a moment.
Good.
So here is the freeway where Mr. Model T Ford allowed his, I think this was way after, but the freeway was...
Computer says no.
The freeway was about having freedom.
Technology.
Okay, I'll stop.
One more time.
Sorry, what is it?
What's that?
What's supposed to pop up?
This is the Gulf Freeway. Don't worry about it. I think we just leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the freeway became this monstrosity that has completely locked us into car transport. How much concrete has gone into that? That is a serious regime. That's technology, huh? Because of a way of thinking that started with too much shit in the time in the cities. So they invented cars, and that regime has not stopped. Now, it's probably one of the biggest problems that we have on the planet. Probably is one of the biggest problems we have on the planet. Check it this one.
So where Nazi lives.
Huh?
Where Nazi lives.
Really?
The Joburg.
No, this is California.
Yeah.
Oh, that's LA.
No, it's too far from there. So it takes.
American freeways.
There's people sitting in the right hand lane.
So this is a great example of a regime. How the hell do you change this? This is a technology that's seriously embedded. Do you remember that first question when you guys said, it's about how do we change and why can't we change, you know? This is why we can't change. Because we are locked in technologically, infrastructurally, into ways of living and ways of being and engaging with technology. We are technology. Technology is us. It's one thing. You cannot escape it. It's impossible. Or is it?
But besides technology just itself, I mean, isn't it all also a product of capitalism? If you didn't have the profit motive, would your design be different and more responsible? If you didn't have the profit motive? I don't know, it's just a question.
I don't think it's always capitalism. I think it's people's, I don't know, nature. And capitalism and profit is not always a bad thing. I mean, if you can sell something and it has a good value for somebody else, why not? But I hear what you're saying.
But
it's rogue capitalism and greed.
I mean,
that's the thing that's created.
Because you cut corners and you use the cheapest options at the time, all of those kind of things to save a buck and to get it to market quicker, and you reduce your design cycles because of your competitors, and so you never design with the ecology or whatever in mind.
Yes.
Also, I mean, we're looking at this, 50, 60 years down the line, and in hindsight, it's always easy to look back. I mean, maybe 50 years from now, they could take a snapshot of this room with all of us in our computers and say the exact same thing that we've locked, and look what terrible things this has led to.
Maybe. But do you guys understand what this picture is about? How do you relate this to that horse problem? It's an extension. This is a solution. This is the solution. Extend the road because there's more cars. Extend the road. Doesn't seem to have worked, has it? So why has that happened? Why not another system to replace cars? Why have they taken that route?
Isn't it also easier to build onto something that already exists rather than to completely redefine and start from scratch? So they always probably think, okay, we've got the road, let's extend, it's cheaper, it's easier, we know the technology, let's extend the road rather than knock the road down.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say now with energy and extension of the same unsustainable problem? Yeah.
I think if you could get people to rethink the way they look at sunk costs, you had a way of redefining that. It's not actually going to, because to change any system, there's massive sunk cost of the investment. If you could, so I'll give you an example. Most universities that we work with in Africa, they've invested in systems and ERPs that don't actually work for the academics, and they don't work for the students either. There's some in South Africa too, but I'm not going to mention any names. And they won't change. The investment has been too high in those systems, so they will never change. You can show them the most amazing things they've ever seen, but because they spend so much money on it already, and it's the same with all of these problems. So if you change the mindsets around the cost, you're going to sink, and maybe get people to think about it in a different way. And it's so difficult because you have to show them the future without being able to take them to the future.
This is what you call lock-in. This is socio-technical lock-in, and there are hundreds of examples, and we are locked in.
But
and we're getting to a point now, no, we can talk now, where how do we change that system? Because what's going to happen? I mean, America is faced with a massive problem, because this is the solution. Bigger and better and faster and awesome. That's their thinking.
Yeah, but they're already innovating. I mean, you can't, this is a static. America is one of the most innovative countries. And they, you know, this is one snapshot. You could take another snapshot of the most innovative things in America out that's totally different.
So is innovative being the most innovative the most intelligent thing? I mean, America are the, I think they're second biggest now greenhouse gas emitters in the world. That's a huge problem. And they're impacting on the rest of the world. They might have been the best innovators.
But that's current. But where are they going? Where will they be in the next 50 years versus today in terms of output of greenhouse gases?
I don't know. I prefer European towns to American towns. I don't know. But New York is cool as well. Yeah.
Cool.
If social lock, if the systemic lock-in, whatever it is the foundation for development and change, then why are certain countries or certain regions developing in some ways, whereas others are developing like this? Because if you go to Europe, your public transportation systems are far more developed. You have far fewer cars on the road.
But that's also because of the size of the places. It's like you can't, France or Germany, those roads are so much smaller than Missionary across LA.
Okay, we're getting somewhere because different places and different cultures develop different technologies and different infrastructures. Why is the US different to Europe? Because of the people.
I think it's a cultural thing.
It's a cultural thing. It's a socio-cognitive thing. It's that structure that's actually created, that social structure that's actually created these ways of thinking or solving problems in America. But it's also the economic system. So if this is going to change on a global level, it's going to require structural social change. That's exactly what we're talking about. So new ways of knowledge production, new virtues, new norms, and new values. That's the real thing that needs to change if the technologies are going to change. It's not the technology. Here's another example in South Africa where we have serious water shortage. I think the Western Cape is going to run out of water in 2017 at current rates. It's because I think, I don't know how many millions of liters that we waste in our infrastructure systems. Millions and millions and millions of liters are wasted in South Africa because we have this massive centralized water system. All around the world, countries are moving to decentralized water systems because they're more efficient. Not all around the world, in a lot of places. Obviously it depends on the country as well, but South Africa is very fond of big centralized moving water around the country, basically. And they've done it very efficiently, but isn't going to be sustainable. India has had some massive problems with big infrastructure, water infrastructure problems. Like the Krishna Basin, do you know about that? So there's a basin of like a river basin, which they dammed in India to feed 2 million people. And after 30 years, the whole river just dried up because they put big infrastructure projects in there, and the water just like got spread into all these canals in the region. And basically 2.5 million people had to move because the water was shut down, because that ecological approach was not taken. It was an infrastructure, technology approach to solving the problem. And there are alternatives, decentralized. I mean, that's not a really good example. This is a smaller, decentralized water purification system using natural methodology. This is in Sweden, actually. So there are different ways and different technologies available, but they're actually not even making an impact because they're not competing. They don't have the power yet to compete with the regime. So there are actually solutions available, and this is where we come in with the concept of niches, which I'm going to come to in a moment. So regimes are these dominant paradigms of a combination of socio-technical structures. They're rooted in prevailing institutions that serves to produce societal functions. So there's interests in maintaining existing systems. And they're path dependent. That means that they grow incrementally, like that highway. It's path dependent, literally. This is another example of that we were speaking about earlier. Is this much different to this?
No.
No, if you
It's quite amazing actually to think about that. I mean, this was the first kind of regime of thinking around solving the problem. There's not much change there, is there?
To ask the individual living in the house.
Yeah, maybe they don't leak as much, but actually a lot of them did. So how do we change the thinking that goes into rolling out these kinds of big infrastructure problems? I mean, this is not a really good example, but it's at least something different, a little bit more innovative. I think this is a real project, but there's actually some really, really nice solutions, but they're not the majority. They're niches. They're competing with this mainstream thinking of block housing. Yeah.
Doesn't this also come back to a social perception though? Because if you have to provide your second view of a house to somebody, would they actually accept that as a house and say, I'm happy to take that as opposed to option 2, the second picture?
Well, absolutely. I mean, the whole toilet saga was exactly that. They want flushing toilets. And these portable use are not flushing toilets, so they reject it. Because it was a status thing, I believe. Even though they're perfectly functional. You know about the poo protest. Why did that happen? That's a really interesting
it wasn't
regime.
It wasn't based on status. It also wasn't based on the toilet per se. It's based on the specific failures of the subcontractors to actually clean the toilets and basic problems with the simple structure. For instance, a lot of these toilets would fall over because they just weren't attached to the ground properly. So it was more, and of course, don't forget the quantity of the toilets in comparison to the amount of people that needed to use them. So it was entirely not about the toilet itself, more than the need and whether that was actually being serviced. And also they did a comprehensive audit of the specific private company who sort of worked on this for the city, and it was quite shocking to see the disparities.
Yeah.
So it was siloed thinking, basically. It's like, here's a solution. Instead of understanding the whole system of how it's going to work.
To be honest, it was criminal activity, because there's money that's being stolen and there's contracts that are being neglected.
But there were a lot of people who actually appreciated the toilet.
No.
Yes, they were. I know they were. There was a small group who were not in appreciation of the toilet.
No, there was a comprehensive audit of the specific issue, and it was definitely not a minority that had the issue.
Was it also about dignity?
Yeah.
And a feeling of, that they weren't, not part of society and they weren't cared about?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a complex thing. But it's an interesting example of a new technology kind of being imposed on society. And in a way, our houses as well, Like, this is, if we can crack the nut on housing and living, that's going to make a huge difference, I think, in South Africa. Yeah.
But in '94, when they came up with RDP housing, at the time, sustainability, what sustainability meant then, and the conditions, the political conditions to get everyone into our house. So they weren't thinking beyond, because then power wasn't an issue, so we just connected to the grid. So for them at that time, that was the ideal solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's also that.
Yeah.
But there's another picture of that because everyone now has a shack next to the house. No, it is.
Yeah, no, it is.
It looks
And they're
like
raised
a
up.
No.
Yeah, they are. But now
Yeah. So it looks exactly
Like that. Like they're on
Like
the
number one.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, it's a lean-to structure.
Yeah.
Why not? Extension of your home.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. I think let's push on. So this is now, unless you do you guys want to talk about this?
I just want to say that with a lot of these issues that we're talking about, whether it's the cars or the toilets or the horse poo, I think the statement that it's a complex issue is sometimes misleading and not useful for tackling it. Even, for example, with the question of the ecology, finished with, well, there's no clear answer. But to make any decision, we're going to have to at some point decide what it is. And it's maybe not about being right or wrong, but it's about making a decision and going forward with it. And whether it's the housing or the toilets, yes, the way the media reports on it and the way our kind of long 2-year sort of political reporting on it happens makes it come across as a complex issue. And it's actually not as complex as it looks. It's the key ingredients that we should be tackling and we should be identifying. And we shouldn't hide under the carpet by saying, this is complex, there's all sorts of possibilities here. We've got to actually get real with where are the key decisions that are not being sort of held accountable for.
Absolutely. But it still remains complex. I mean, it being complex means that there are moving parts that cannot necessarily be predefined or understood. That's all that complex means. You can't, jumbo jet is a complicated machine, but all the parts can be unpacked. Whereas if something is complex, you cannot actually know what's going to happen in the future. That's what complex means. So a lot of these problems are complex because we have a solution, but we actually don't know what the result is going to be. Guys, we're going to move on. We can continue the discussion in a moment. Unless you guys want to talk about this specific one of other examples that you know of in society. Unsustainable socio-technical. What are other unsustainable socio-technical systems in South Africa, for example? Besides driving. Do you have an example? Facebook.
Yes.
Work. Work is not a place, it's something you do. And so there's some stuff that can happen in the, I mean, all of those traffic jams that you see, it's because people need to be at one place at one particular time. And so a lot's happening abroad, obviously, but I think more can happen here in terms of how companies organize themselves, and it can relieve a lot of pressures in terms of just flexibility. And so there's one thing.
What about food and food systems? The way in which we're producing agriculture, is that sustainable, you guys think, in South Africa? What are other
chains could probably be more sustainable.
Say again?
Like, so we could create more sustainable supply chains, more like smallholder farmer supply chain relationships on a bigger scale. I know a lot of companies are doing that, but more could.
Yeah. So is that related to transport as well, in a way?
Yeah, and also processes.
Yeah, food production.
What about the fact that people are living longer and they people retire and they're not necessarily have the resources to take care of themselves until they die? Would that be an unsustainable social technical system, the healthcare system that people are?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I mean hospitals and the way in which hospitals, healthcare is another one.
Healthcare.
What else? What's unsustainable? What cannot continue the way it is?
The way we produce food.
We've just spoken about that. Transport is a big one, eh? What else?
Isn't it every single sector of the way that we're living almost? I mean, you can probably put it down to from everything from education to power to food production through to water systems through to sewage systems are probably unproductive if we actually look at the way that they're done. It doesn't seem like there are many things that are not that are sustainable.
Yeah, it's a lot. Waste. That's a huge unsustainable socio-technical system because it's supported by so many different other socio-technical systems like our production systems that actually produce waste. Why do we have to throw waste out?
But are we that sure that producing, take for instance food production, that producing food on a small scale directly in cities is going to be that much more sustainable? Because the reason that it got to that point was to maximize the efficiencies of that system. That's why it was all consolidated into one field with a higher yield per square meter. Now, if we then go and put it into small holdings into each of the different communities, yes, you're going to cut out your supply chain, possibly, but your farming methods are not going to be as productive.
Well, I mean, the whole debate about centralized versus decentralized, and this is a better solution for this society, is all about experimentation and trial and error, and you guys are 100% right. I mean, we don't know like that a new technology is necessarily going to be better, but we have to at least try, right? We have to progress, and that's what transition management is all about, which we're going to be talking about in a moment. So this is now a little bit back to the theory. It's about understanding these different levels. Are you guys starting to understand what the different levels are? So the one that we've been speaking about the most is really established regimes, established structures, established socio-technical structures in society, like the road system. But then there's also something beyond that, which is called the landscape level. And regimes are often shaped by landscapes. Okay, I'm going to give some examples in a moment. And then you have the new technologies, or the alternatives, which are called niches. And transitions are about tensions between the regimes. When the regime starts not functioning anymore, it actually starts cracking and creates opportunities for new technologies or new innovations to take place. That's how transitions occur. So the niche is what we call the locus for radical innovations, where loose structures and small populations allow for experimentation, novelty and innovations to take place. It is primarily a social process. The development of new technologies, the development of new solutions are social processes. People allow it to happen. The regime is the domain of established and entrenched and stable structures where mostly incremental innovation takes place. And often regimes are so powerful that they don't allow alternative technologies to compete with it at all. And then the landscape, to summarize, is an exogenous, it means external structure, and it could be the actual physical geography of a place. It could be the culture, like the American culture is a landscape. It's a socio-technical landscape. The European culture is another kind of landscape. Global markets are a landscape. Okay? So these are ways of understanding that there are different moving parts in transitions. It's not just one thing. There's tensions between the structures. Some of the structures are small and try to compete with the regime, but they can't. And then there are other massive structures which cannot be changed by human beings, called the landscapes, which are like physical geographical landscapes. And then there are regimes, which are the things that are in place at the moment. And there's a tension between those things. So this shows quite nicely. This is the landscape level, which is completely structured. It's a locked-in system that cannot be changed or altered by people, really, or individuals. It will take very, very long time to shift. And sometimes things happen, like earthquakes in Fukushima, that actually change the regime. So there was a shock in the system, which stopped nuclear power for a while in generation in many countries and stopped their regimes. I'm going to give an example of it in a moment. So these are the regimes which are made up of socio-technical systems that are intertwined, like the transport system or the waste system is a regime because it's multiple technologies and social systems that are connected to each other, which become so rigid that it's really, really difficult to compete with. But then there are alternatives that exist in society. And sometimes these alternatives link up and become strong enough to actually become alternatives to the regime. And that's why we have what we call a patchwork of regimes that compete with each other for dominance. Yep.
So therefore, does the change need to happen from the bottom up, or if there's some sort of disaster? Because I imagine if there's some sort of disaster, you need to rebuild quite quickly. So if you don't have the alternatives sort of happening in the background, then you're just going to do things the way that you used to instead of allowing something new to emerge.
Exactly, 100%. So the energy crisis in South Africa is an opportunity. It's a window of opportunity for the renewable energy regime, which might be a biogas niche, it might be a solar energy niche, it might be a mix of different technologies that's able to compete with this regime, which is about, or maybe this regime, which is coal-fired generation. But even within coal-fired generation, there are niches which make this regime more competitive, like carbon capture and storage is actually a niche technology which is making this regime more powerful again. So regimes are seen as the paradigm, the dominant paradigm. Who knows about Kuhnian scientific paradigms? It's a good example. So a paradigm shift occurs in science when that scientific language cannot actually solve the problem. It can no longer solve the problem. So you need to create a new paradigm of science to be able to solve that problem. If mathematics cannot solve the geometry of this cup, we might need engineering as a new paradigm on mathematics to understand it. In the same way, techno-economic paradigms hit up against barriers, ecological barriers and environmental barriers, and a new paradigm has to come into place. Like the horse shit. A new techno-economic paradigm was the problem. Okay. Skip that one. So this is a great, that same example of what a paradigm was. We've gone through that. So niches are really interesting, and this is where what it's all coming down to is about supporting niches in a way that they can actually begin to compete with regimes. And that's where innovation and entrepreneurship becomes so important. And niches need support. They don't just emerge. So they need to be protected spaces. And these are spaces around new technologies, but they're also physical, geographical spaces potentially. How do we create examples within our societies of new ways of living? The housing example is a great example. How do we create a community that actually works and it's not the same as a non-functional, unsustainable community? That's a niche because it becomes a living example of something different. It's a new alternative. And if you don't have that in place, as you were saying, then it's difficult to replace the regime. It's starting to make sense. Okay. I'm just trying to give some examples. So this is a great example of a socio-technical niche. So this is solar energy. This is a very good example of a niche, which is electric car energy. It's a different system altogether. It's some incremental innovation, but it's a different power generation in many ways. It's not fossil fuels so much, unless, I mean, yes, we are generating electricity from fossil fuels, but if we generate it from these guys, it could be a lot more sustainable than what we've got. What do you think? Why is it still a niche? That's the question. Why is this not like everybody has one?
Because the convenience is not there yet for the consumer.
Okay. Or is it there's no infrastructure?
But it takes a lot. I would say it's a convenience for the consumer.
Because there's no infrastructure.
Yeah.
And why is there no infrastructure?
No demand.
Well,
It's too long to match to.
because it looks like this. What happens if you run out of electricity in the middle of this highway? You can't just bring along a battery. Or maybe you can, I don't know, in the future they will probably. Yeah, we can call Elon. This is another little niche. Sounds like a very political example, so I don't really want to talk about it too much. But I mean, why isn't that, is that a good solution? I think it's like, you pull out this and it dries with some chemical or something, and then you can just put it in your back garden. I think it's a waterless toilet. Yeah. And they're trying to test that now. I think the new minister of, you know what, just like, they're going to have a revolution on sanitation. That's like the new thing. So there's a lot of little solutions for, shit seems to be a theme that's like, there. A lot of solutions for that, but we haven't chosen one yet. You know, they still need to be tested and tried in society, and that's part of the transition process that we're going through at the moment. But the opportunity is the important thing, because the opportunity is the crisis that we're going through. It's a sanitation crisis, a health crisis, it's a service delivery crisis that we're going through. That's why these guys are striking, because they're not getting the services. So how do we actually use that as an opportunity to innovate? That's what it's all about. That's another sandbag house structure, which I think is quite cool. And very different in design and thinking to the other conventional house. But it's a niche. Why doesn't everyone have a house like that?
And it could also be expensive.
Yeah. But the point is that this niche and this niche and this hasn't been able to compete yet with the regime. It's not strong enough because it hasn't become mainstream, but also tried and tested and used. It takes time as well. It takes time.
So it takes time because there's so many factors at play, right? Yeah. I mean, big cars are a status symbol in this country, and I think in America as well. Like big highway, it's not just because the road gets bigger and bigger because there's a demand for it, because of the status symbol, because of the automotive industry in America and the amount of jobs that that creates, etc., etc. It's a massive systemic problem. If one thing changes, then it's got such a massive ripple effect on so many.
I think things are actually changing a hell of a lot faster, as you say, than we think. Remember, those transitions originally that took place took up to 50 to 100 years to change. This is like being, okay, we had 20 years, but I mean, there's still a lot of trial and error that needs to take place before we actually get things right. And I personally am trying to be positive, and I think that there is a revolution around the thinking, at least, to go sustainable, which is now resulting in a lot of these little niche technologies, which is really exciting. Yeah.
Can we take the learnings from other niches and other different industries and how they were mainstream? Like if you look at the iPhone when it first came out, it was super niche. Now it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere.
Yeah, the iPhone is an amazing example of an innovation that diffused into society like really, really quickly. But this is quite an interesting concept, is that niches and technologies exist as technologies, but it's really about the people that accept the technologies. When they become accepted and used within society, that's when they grow. And that's actually really important to know for your business and concept development as well. And it's going to be the theme of the last part of the lecture, is really about understanding that gap between your thoughts and what you think is useful in society and what people in general think. Because there is a gap, there's definitely a gap. And that's why prototypes go through multiple iterations before they become used in society. Or they're just completely rejected. Like fuel cells. Fuel cells were like, you know, this is too expensive, we're not going to use that. Fuel cells were actually invented in like 1920 something. Or 19, before the Second World War. And then they were like shelved. Now, fuel cells are like the big thing because we're having an energy crisis. So they're resurfing. A lot of niches actually don't even make it to the market at all. And a lot of technologies and a lot of solutions exist out there already, but they were just rejected by society. I mean, the idea of electric cars goes way back. And it also requires learning. So exactly what you were saying about the toilets. It's about really learning when you try and test that new technology in society. You've got to learn and you've got to change that and develop it. And it takes a long time. And then it's also about visions. And visions is another theme, and leadership in taking that technology to the market. Okay, so this is now the three levels I've spoken about. I've spoken about the regime, and then the niche, which is trying to compete, and then the landscape. So the landscape are like a city. You can't change a city overnight. But a landscape is also the geography. There are things that are really, really difficult to change. They are beyond our control. Like in some places you have arable farming land, in other places you don't have arable farming land. In the places that had arable farming land, they developed quicker and they built cities in those areas because there was availability of food. So that actually structured technology in a way. It was an exogenous factor. It wasn't something that humans really could plan. This is a totally different kind of actual landscape, and they had to devise other methods and ways of cultivating the land for food. They had to adapt to that landscape. International markets are also a landscape. Financial markets. How do we control financial markets? As a country, can you control it? No, you can have a small impact, maybe, but you can't actually control it. The city of New York is a huge landscape, socio-technical landscape. It's really, really difficult to suddenly make the city of New York sustainable. It's almost impossible. Incrementally, yes. Shipping, for example, transport and trade between nations. That's a landscape. That's a really long-term trend that can change. That could change very quickly as well. So there can also be shocks, which are beyond our control, within landscapes, which create opportunities for regime change and create opportunities for new niches to actually come into play, like the South African energy crisis. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that. I want you guys to write down on a global level or on a South African level, what are socio-technical niches? Give an example of 3 socio-technical niches. And what is a competing regime? Not the energy one. And then what landscape do they actually exist in? Does it make sense? And let's have a little discussion. If you guys want to have another break, because it's getting long now as well. Got another hour of lecture. So if you guys want to have a little break, that's fine. And then we'll come back and discuss your examples. So why don't you think about your examples first? You can use your popular mechanics again to get ideas. And then we're going to talk about how these systems interact. Why are there some technologies out there which just never have made it to the market? And what are those technologies? Are there any sustainable solutions out there in South Africa which just haven't made it because of the regime? And why? How can that change? And are there examples of changing events? Maybe war or global climate change. Climate change is a good example of a changing landscape which is going to create changes in the regime. So think about those examples and let's have a discussion about that. Okay. And we've got a nice video, so don't worry, coming soon. It's not all lecture. So this